Continuing our reading in No Frills Science Fiction. Today is Chapter 2. The long confining months aboard the space survey ship Liza Hatcher were difficult for the exploratory party. Alex and Dana fought so often that Dr. Harrison took to calling them Tom and Jerry. But as time wore on, an uneasy truce developed between the two, a truce born of mutual respect for Alex's capable father, and mutual disregard for the brusque and domineering Admiral Haig. 26 dreary days before they were due to land on Pluto, Alex was playing four-dimensional chess with Dana and losing badly. Conversational gambits had long since exhausted themselves, and the two silently fought the game tooth and nail for every pawn, rook, or spacer they could force off the board. Losing, especially to Dana, always made Alex curious. With ill grace, he advanced his knight to the 4th level, a forced move where it was immediately captured by Dana's president. Ignoring his jeopardized vice president, he burst out, "So what are you doing here anyhow? Just what are you getting out of this job?" Dana replied smoothly, "It's a job, Alex, a job intended, and I intend to do well. Your play." "I know it's your job, officer." Alex was dangerously near to sneering. "But what kind of person chooses to be a policeman? And that's what I'm interested in. What makes you become a government flunky?" "And you're not, cadet?" Dana's disdain was palpable. Alex bristled. "I'm a spaceman, Officer Drew. I belong out here, and you just don't. If you were trained for this, that'd be something else. But you and the rest of these space lubbers, what do you know about what's happening out here? Nothing. When something goes wrong, when the unexpected happens, we don't accuse people. That's Earthside thinking. Out here, we know a frontier doesn't abide by Earth laws." A dangerous light gleamed in Dana's eyes, and her mouth had softened slightly. Although she was angry, her voice was under careful control. Her words were firm, but understanding. "Listen, Alex, I know you and your father have been under a great strain through all this, but this is my job. I don't have to like it, but I've sworn to do it. Space isn't your personal preserve, no matter what the Cadet Corps chooses to believe. The frontier isn't romantic, my friend. It's dirty and uncivilized, and it happens to be my job to police it. Even..." A keening whine interrupted her words. In the instant it took Alex to blink, the cabin was shattered. The bulkhead had suddenly sprung more holes than a sieve. Suddenly, they were both pitched into the air, tumbling in an eddy of terrific and conflicting forces. Dana reached for some sort of handhold, but the tumbling maelstrom offered no sanctuary. Flashing by, she caught sight of Alex being thrown against a curving bulkhead. For a moment, he seemed to cling there, somehow stationary in the chaos, and then, with a look of terror and a squeal that was barely audible above the scream of rending metal and whistling wind, he was torn away from the wall, leaving a bloody patch of skin and torn cloth behind. Dana had time only to wince before the force of decompression began propelling her toward another rent in the Hatcher's hull. She grabbed a seat cushion that was flying past and forced it ahead of her, kneading it against the section of the ship's wall. With almost explosive force, the thick fabric was extruded into the thick bulkhead and held. A wailing stopped almost immediately, but the ship was still obviously laboring badly. "Atmosphere down," Alex managed to gasp. "I think we're still leaking. We have to plug the hull." He was plunging across the cabin toward the remains of the chess set when some flying debris grazed his wounded right shoulder. With a shout of pain, Alex curled into a protective ball and hung motionless over the scene, unable to move in weightless space, suspended 6 feet from his goal. With a flash of comprehension, Dana saw what Alex had been up to. If the magnetic chess pieces could be released into the air, they would be drawn into the remaining microscopic fissures in the walls and be held there by their magnetic bases. If only she could release the cushion patch and put Alex's idea to work. The oxygen, she thought, won't last long. Straining her long, lithe body to its fullest extent, she stretched her legs behind her and tried to kick over the enclosed chest set and release the pieces. There was very little oxygen now, and her mind was beginning to wander. She thought briefly of Alex. It was a shame he was going to die too. Just as she blacked out, she felt a spasm of pain in her left foot. And then nothing. Consciousness returned in a series of sickening waves. Whenever it seemed that she was close to knowing who she was and what had happened, a galaxy of nausea would strike her down into the peaceful dark of space again. Gradually, she became aware of a smoothing, soothing warmth poised over her eyes. A quiet and concerned voice was calling her name. She could feel the impression someone made, sitting at the edge of her bed. Bed? It was gradually coming back to her, but at the first sight of Alex's motionless body coiled in space, she shrank back into unconsciousness. She was vaguely aware that the warm spot on her forehead came and went several times during the passing hours, and when it did, the bed always sloped under someone's weight. The next morning, after a long and sound sleep, she woke from her dreams and tried to roll out of bed. "Whoa there, my girl." The voice was bright and cheerful, and after a puzzled moment, Dana was able to attach it to Dr. Harrison. He put a restraining hand on her forehead, and she felt a familiar warmth. She felt glad, yet oddly disappointed. "You'll have to take it easy for a while, Dana," the doctor was explaining. "You suffered from severe decompression complicated by a good old-fashioned case of the bends when we repressurized your cabin. If you don't follow my instructions for once, you could have some very tricky lung complications." Dana returned to the doctor, a wan smile, and asked, "What happened? Is Alex all right?" Perfectly, my dear." He seemed pleased by the question. "My boy's as strong as an ox. In any case, he was unconscious through the whole ordeal, and accordingly he didn't need nearly as much oxygen as you did. You're the one who saved the day, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if you were awarded a medal. Using those chess pieces was really quick thinking." "But I didn't," Dana began to protest before she was cut short by a more boyish version of Harrison's calm voice. "So you're up and about, eh? It seems we took a bit of a meteor shower together, so I knew you wouldn't mind me barging in on you in your bedclothes and all." "Alex, so you're all right?" "Fit as a fiddle, thanks to you." In a quick aside, "Don't say too much about our little adventure together until we've had a talk, will you? I got a few ideas I'd like to try on you." Dana's head was beginning to swim again. Seeing her face go pale, the doctor urged her to get more sleep and ushered everyone out of the cabin. As she was drifting off, she thought, "So I've become Alex's ally? Well, worse things could happen." Then she nodded off to sleep. Spaceships are not noted for their banqueting facilities. Accordingly, the quarters afforded the ship's company for ceremonial purposes were cramped indeed. They doubled as the ship's dining facility and hydroponics garden, with neat plastic covers affixed over the trays of verdant vegetation. Dana was the reluctant guest of honor. "But Alex," she whispered, "you're every bit as deserving of the space medal as I am. More so. It was your idea to use those chess pieces, not mine. I'm going to tell them so." Dana was worried. Alex's behavior since the accident seemed inexplicable. He had offered his father and Admiral Haig's inquiry board a completely fictitious account of the meteor shower. According to his version, he'd immediately been struck on the head by some flying debris and knocked unconscious. Result, she was being honored as a hero, and he was being passed by. Very nice for her, no doubt, but what was he up to? "Alex, before this goes on, I have to know, why did you want me to keep the truth to myself? I can't believe modesty lies behind all this." Alex had to chuckle. With a cool, deliberating eye, he examined the crew and officers nearest them. Apparently satisfied that their conversation was private, he bent his head and said in a low voice, "You're so right. It's not modesty that compels me, but caution." At this, Dana began to laugh, but a look at Alex's pale, sober face stilled her almost instantly. "After you blacked out, I was pretty much in shock, I guess." He continued. "I couldn't move, and my shoulder was killing me, but I was conscious all the time." He pinched his words as though they had special import. Dana looked at him inquiringly. "The first to make it into the cabin after they unshipped the automatic airlock was the Admiral. He was looking for something." Alex's voice had grown decidedly grim. "Well, hurry up with it, Alex. What are you driving at?" "Dana, I watched Haig search the room for fragments of a bomb." "A bomb?" Dana's outburst drew inquiring glances from the crew and officers filling the room. In a lower voice, she asked, "What do you mean, a bomb?" "I went back and examined the cabin very carefully. I found these." Alex pulled a small gray envelope from his uniform pocket and sprinkled out several tiny balls, flattened and torn by impact, into Dana's cupped hand. "These are our meteor shower, Dana. It's only by the merest chance we weren't killed. We weren't hit by a meteor. A bomb exploded inside the cabin, releasing frag shot, and it certainly meant for us." "A bomb?" Dana repeated softly. "That's why you don't want anyone to know you were conscious when the Admiral came into the cabin? You don't want him to know you saw him?" "Exactly. That's why you have to accept the medal. I want everyone to think I was sound asleep through the whole thing. Compliments of a bump on the noggin. And now, you'd better hurry up. Wouldn't do to be late to your own award drill." Dana stepped across the room in a daze and mounted a small platform erected for the occasion. She was flanked by the top brass of the ship, Dr. Harrison and Colonel Kai on her right, the ship's captain and the Admiral on her left. As the ceremony commenced, she found it impossible to concentrate on the traditional litany, "For valorous service above and beyond." The words had no meaning for her. All her thoughts were on the Admiral and the bomb, and Pluto only 4 days away. That's the end of chapter 2.